Good evening, everybody. Give me a moment. Sorry I'm a little late. I was taking to some, I was showing my son a few things and I had some other stuff to deal with as far as family wise. So it's a family first mantra that, I'm pretty much bound to. So, um, I was late getting in. I had to do some more setting up on StreamYard. Sometimes it logs you out and makes you, re-authenticate who you are before you get back in. So it's showing him how that setup goes. So here we are tonight, and give me one moment. All right, and we are good. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Panther and Cage. Um, I want to welcome you all here. Here, we believe that there's no such thing as a dumb question. And this stream is a part of a series of what we call vlogcasts, where we speak on a variety of topics, and we do this from a unique Afrocentric perspective. My name is Anthony, obviously, but I'm going to be your host tonight. But here, when we have everybody in, we usually call each other by different code names or whatnot, just to entertain it, make it entertaining. But as I said, I'm your host tonight, and I hope that you guys are you know going to participate. I know that the game is going to be on soon, but I'm just hoping that you guys will be able to catch this even after, because it's going to talk about some very important subjects, and I'm going to throw a bunch of information at you. I may chop this up and do another part maybe tomorrow night, but that is to say that you are welcome to participate. You're welcome to comment. You're welcome to like or even share this live stream. Um, I want you guys to know that your comments do help contribute, and they do give us a chance to be able to accurately measure exactly what are going to be the relevant, discussions on the path forward and identifying tangible solutions. So, um, our goal is hope to stop the perpetuation of social and cultural bigotry. And that if this is your first time joining us, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Hope you're going to enjoy it. All right. So this is Panther and Cage Police Brutality. We're going to talk a little bit about the beating of Tyre Nichols. But one of the first things I want to do before we even get stuck into the thick of most of this information tonight is I want to thank brave journalists like Georgia Fort for being able to service our society, our entire society, with information that precedes transparency that's given to us by the local government officials. When a lot of the incidents were occurring uh, after the Tyre Nichols incident, um, there was a lot of, well, let me go back. Let me state this. Uh, when there are a lot of incidents that occur, um, incidents that are important to the Black community, it is, brave journalists like Georgia Fort, that give citizens the opportunity to understand exactly what's going on. And I'll give you an example. When this incident with Tyre Nichols occurred, or when it first started, um, it was all over TikTok that people were saying that there were no protests. But, when I logged into my Facebook, because I'm subscribed to Georgia Fort's Facebook page, as soon as I logged in, I was able to see that there were protests occurring. And that fact helped me to be able to compete with that false narrative that was being created. And mainly it was being created over on TikTok, but it's just viral right now. TikTok's just a hot thing right now. Most of the stuff is on there. It's just there's a fire hose of information. But it appeared that no one cared. They stated that no one in the Black community cared about this issue. And when I say no one, I mean anyone significant within the Black community, because the creators that were making these accusations were trying to utilize that narrative to perpetuate other narratives. And the narrative that they were trying to perpetuate was that when it comes to Black on Black crime, our specific community doesn't care. And that kind of lie is extremely irresponsible, and it's dangerous. and it assumes that it is permissible to perpetrate the unaliving of any other member in our community, so long as the condition is set that the officers in this particular, uh, are of African descent. Excuse me. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, I wanted to thank Georgia for her work. It's helped me to observe and assess, this particular horrific incident with some objectivity. And I say that because it was hard to go in without some emotions. Anyway, all right. Now, we're going to start off and try to be nice. We're going to start off with who was Tyre Nichols. Okay. Let me go ahead and see if I can share this screen. I'll get that off of there first so you can see it. And then we're going to go to all right. All right, so let's discuss this. You can put in comments as soon as I see the comments come in. I'll try to see if I can put them on the screen, and it'll be just like you can have a conversation with me now. But who was Tyre DeAndre Nichols? Okay, we know that Tyre Nichols was a 29-year-old father of a 4-year-old, accompanying, according to the New York Times, and it was reported that Tyre Nichols was the father of a 4-year-old boy. He had a passion for skateboarding and taking photographs of sunsets. Tyre Nichols shared a birthday with Breonna Taylor. Interesting fact, June the 4th, and he was born in 1993. So apparently, Tyre is from California. I believe it stated that he was from Sacramento, California. And in the year 2020 was when he had moved to Memphis. According to, I'm sure there's a story behind that, but according to various news outlets, they were reporting that Nichols worked at FedEx for almost a year. And it was said that Tyre Nichols had Crohn's disease. Now, Crohn's disease is an incurable chronic inflammatory bowel disease that affects the lining of the digestive tract. And it places that person that's diagnosed with it at an increased risk for colorectal cancer. And that's significant, I'm sure. Tyre weighed only about 145 pounds, and it stated that he stood 6'3". Now I'm 6'3", and if he's only 145 pounds, that is extremely lightweight. I'm sitting over here at 238, 240. I know I got a little extra weight, but 6'3", 145 pounds. That's not a lot. Okay. Tyre Nichols was a loving man, according to his family. So by all accounts, even though those accounts may be brief accounts, Tyre Nichols, he was a man who was taking care of his responsibilities. Okay. And now because of one fateful night, his son is more at risk to becoming a statistic. This is a grim fact. Now, the very same statistics that I just mentioned, they will be exploited because of some of the tasteless assessments that, have been made in the testimony of what causes incidents like the beginning of the incident that we're about to discuss, the incident that took Tyre Nichols' life. And you'll understand that statement later on in the presentation, maybe tomorrow night, but I'll get to this information. I know it's late. So next, what we're going to get to is what was the probable cause? On January the 7th, Memphis Police Department Scorpion Unit police officers conducted a traffic stop for what was reported to be reckless driving on East Rains Road after boxing in his vehicle. The officers of the Scorpion Unit moved in with their weapons drawn, and they moved in at the driver, shouting the commands for the driver to immediately get out of the vehicle. Now, the driver, who was identified as Tyre Nichols, attempted to ask why he was being pulled over, why he was commanded to get out of the vehicle, and what exactly was happening. But There were numerous commands from the officers that were ordering him out of the vehicle and onto the ground. It's not as Nichols attempted to cooperate with the commands, saying, all right, several times, more commands followed. It was reported that up to 70 plus commands were shouted throughout the entire ordeal. And then the video shows that there were several commands coming from each of the officers before Tyre began to, be beaten in the street. But just after, Tyre was ordered to turn over onto his stomach, he was threatened to be tased. And that's when he stood up and attempted to run down what was identified as Ross Road. Sorry about that. I don't know if you're getting any inconsistent images. Please let me know. How you doing, Amber? The officers followed suit. They pursued. And when the officers caught up to him, they were punching, kicking, and threatening Tyre Nichols, all at the same time while he cried out for his mother. I don't know if anybody's seen the video, but it's a pretty gruesome. It's a gruesome thing when you hear that him crying out for his mother. Another officer pepper sprayed Tyre, getting some of the spray on another officer, all while the officer, while another officer beat him with a baton. The baton is known as the ASP. Um, when watching the video, what I noticed was that the officer who hit him with the asp appeared to be frustrated because he was affected by the pepper spray. So one of the officers ran up to Tyre and kicked him in the head as if, he was a kicker on a football team. And I hate to say it like that, but that's, when I tried to explain it, it was not a punt, but like a field goal kick. And this is, if you're doing a field goal kick, you're aiming, there's a lot of placing that's going on there. So that was exactly what the kick was like. So while the beating was occurring, there were constant commands for Tyre to give the officer his hands, and that's what you'll probably remember without even you'll probably recall without even going back and looking at the video, is that you kept hearing hands, 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 give me your hands, show me your hands. He was also given the commands to turn over on the stomach at the same time, and then there were other commands that were later they were all deemed those other commands were deemed impossible. One of the officers even called him boy, which is significant to me. It's significant because aside from the racial sensitivities that would be evident with the quality of diversity training, the 5 officers were identified as African American. Now, the names of those officers are Justin Smith, Emmett Martin III, Tadarius Bean, Desmond Mills Jr., and Demetrius Haley. The officers were all fired from the Memphis Police Department and then subsequently arrested and charged for aggravated kidnapping and second-degree murder. There was a 6th officer that was involved in the brutal beating or the death of Tyre Nichols, but we'll identify him later. And there was a discussion about a 7th identified member, a 7th unidentified member of that Scorpion unit that was I guess he was relieved of duty too. But that was all following a Memphis Police Department internal investigation. And also two emergency EMTs were fired along with a lieutenant in the fire department. And I wasn't 100% sure the specifics regarding the failure to provide appropriate care to Tyre Nichols after the beating, other than the fact that they stood around for about 19, 20 minutes. But I do know that it didn't seem that they didn't act with a sense of urgency. That's what I noticed as I was watching it. Now Tyre laid on the ground, beaten, and they walked up in the very beginning. They casually asked him to sit up. They sat up while all the officers were standing around the vehicle, and they were basically rehashing what they were attempting, to establish facts surrounding the incident, and that's important because as they were standing there, they were actually stating, "Oh, he did this, he did that," and what they were doing was they were getting their story straight. But let me get into the thick of this. I'm gonna try to only show this for a little while because I know this is a horrible sight to see. But I want to get this point through. Perceptions were reflected about what these officers were doing in that moment. And what they were doing is just what I said before, is they were getting their story together so that they could all have a corroborating report to submit. And there's a lot of sketchy things regarding this entire encounter, like the fact that these officers who made contact with Tyre Nichols' mother informed her that Tyre was acting like he was on drugs and alcohol, and because of that, they would have to take him down to the hospital, and then there was no need for her to go to the hospital. So, in fact, Tyre's mother, who goes by the name of Rovon Wells, stated that the officer told her that she wasn't allowed to go to the hospital to see her son. And after she was contacted by a physician, she came to the hospital and almost didn't recognize her son, laying there in the hospital bed, beaten and bruised and intubated. And I think, saying that, I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to take this image off the screen because that's graphic. I just wanted to show it. I didn't want to show any video, but I did want to show, that more people are speculating the reasons for the initial police stop with Tyre Nichols. And I reviewed the snapshot, or I viewed a snapshot of what looked to be an incident report, and that was done about a week ago. And it did state that reckless driving was the probable cause for the initial traffic stop. But in fact, the incident, report read like this: on January 7th, 2003, at 2026 100 hours, 2026 hours, excuse me. I should know better than that. Officer McKinney responded to an aggravated assault at Rains and Ross Road. Detective Martin observed a 2017 blue Nissan Sentra driving recklessly at a high rate of speed. Detective Martin observes the suspect, Tyre Nichols, going west on Rains Road into oncoming traffic on East Rains Road before conducting the traffic stop. Detective Martin conducted the stop at Ross and Rains Road using his blue lights and sirens. Detective Martin made contact with the driver/suspect, Tyre Nichols, commanding him to exit the vehicle. The suspect, Tyre Nichols, was refusing a lawful detention by the law enforcement officers, and he started to fight with detectives. Detectives noticed that the suspect, Tyre Nichols, was sweating profusely and irate when he exited the vehicle. Detectives gave verbal commands to stop resisting, and then the suspect, Tyre Nichols, grabbed for Detective Martin's gun. Now, I want everybody to focus on that last statement too. That was made in that incident report, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to detail why I believe that to be an inaccuracy that will be used, that has been used, and will continue to probably be used to excuse an excessive level of force. And in this case, that excessive level of force, whatever, in this alleged traffic stop. Now, but let's go ahead and continue. Detective Haley gave verbal commands and then deployed his chemical agent. The chemical agent had no effect, and the suspect, Tyre Nichols, continued to resist. This is all coming from the incident report. Suspect Tyre Nichols continued to fight as the detective gave verbal commands again to stop resisting, and Detective Hemphill deployed his taser into the suspect, Tyre Nichols' torso area, but the taser had no effect. Suspect Tyre Nichols pulled the probes out and began running southbound on Ross. Detectives began to pursue the suspect, Tyre Nichols, and located him on Bear Creek Lane. After a brief foot chase, suspect Tyre Nichols was detained at Bear Creek Lane and Castlegate Lane. While attempting to detain the suspect, Tyre Nichols, he began actively resisting by pulling duty belts and grabbing Officer Smith by his vest. He was given multiple commands to stop resisting, which he ignored. Chemical agent was deployed again, and it was ineffective. Detective Mills deployed his department-issued ASP baton while giving verbal commands to stop resisting, striking him several times in the right arm and attempting to get the suspect, Tyre Nichols, to comply. After several verbal commands, give me a moment. So tell me that. After several verbal commands, detectives were able to get the suspect Tyre Nichols into custody. Memphis Police Department Engine 55 and Unit 28 made the scene and transported the subject to St. Francis Park in critical condition. Suspect Tyre Nichols' mother, Rovon Wells, made the scene and advised the subject Tyre Nichols went out with friends, and she believes that they may have spiked his drink. Uh, Lieutenant D. Smith made the scene and advised uh, Major W. Mathena and Major C. Mahoney were also advised. So there were several inconsistencies from the incident report, as you can see, and what was captured from the body worn camera footage, mainly of Officer Hemphill. We'll talk about him in a moment. Uh, there were inconsistencies right from the start with the incident. Tyree never exited the vehicle; they removed him from the vehicle. Um, and I believe that was actually seen from Officer Detective Hemphill's body camera. Um, there were other inconsistencies that basically were captured from the police sky cam that was pictured to view it from that distant perspective. This officially makes that incident report basically that and other issues. It makes the incident report a false report because it reveals a lie by omission. And omission of critical details can shape the outcome of a complaint. It can shape the outcome of a report, any court case, etc. I think everybody knows that. No one's, in contention with that. There's something real quick. I'm just taking a look at some of the other. Okay. All right. So we know that this makes the incident report false. Um, the report doesn't document the kick to Tyree's head. It doesn't document the ass strike to Tyree's head and the number of punches that Tyree suffered. Now, these affect the severity of the medical treatment necessary for Tyree's recovery. Okay, and that would be why, after an internal investigation, the fire department lieutenant and the two MTs were probably terminated. There's a lot of responsibility charged to the officers to investigate and document facts in reports. But these will be key pieces to prosecution's judicial process, and they could even help the defendant's case also. But just just putting that out there. Now, the Memphis police chief, Sarah Lynn Davis, she condemned the officers for calling their actions incomprehensible and unconscionable. Let me go do something really quick. No, let me see. I think I need to change something. I think I need to change the privacy settings for something really quick, or will restrict my viewership. If you have any questions right now, would be a good time to go ahead and give me the feedback or tell me what you're tracking, what you're understanding, or what you're not understanding. Right now, I'm just checking the connectivity issues and if to see what if it's streaming, if there's any issues with the stream. So I'm actually going on to Facebook mainly because that's where I have the issues. No doubt, it's probably set on a restricted setting. I usually do these public, so yeah. Right. Okay. Now, getting back to police accountability, Chief Sherilyn Davis formed an organized crime unit, and she called it Scorpion. The unit was formed 2 years ago in October of 2021, and it consisted of over 40 police officers. Now, Scorpion was an acronym that stood for Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhoods. The unit was shut down and disbanded on January 10th, 3 days after the beating of Tyre Nichols. However, the police chief, Sarah Lynn Davis, faced controversy before, and she did this in a very similar way because she had commanded a unit that was called Red Dog while she had served as the commander in Atlanta. Now, like the Scorpion unit, the Red Dog unit was deactivated after there were allegations that were made of excessive force and police brutality that was being committed by members of the team. Both of these units were considered to be like a special operations unit, and they both, uh, they operated that way in both communities, and they agreed um, that the units were simply designated as violent bullies who attempted to pull people over and wave a gun in their face. They also proceeded to beat citizens up. There have been numerous complaints that both of those units had terrorized underserved and Black and Brown communities. But Memphis Police Chief Sarah Davis is accused of supporting the unethical behavior, and because of the current climate surrounding the police accountability and police reform, she had been accused of just, posturing and providing lip service, with the intent to conduct damage control. This is why I think Leo Kelly was talking about why did they, how did they present this? Why did they open this? The press, the release that they did this the way they did it. And I know there are two reasons why. One is because of the demand of for transparency, and the other is that she was posturing. So you are right, Leo Kelly. I just wanted to just state that there were two reasons why. But I know that because of the issue of transparency, if there's no transparency, then it does lead to protest. And according to them, protests worry them because they believe that protests will turn into riots. So it's now being reported, or actually, this is late news, but it was reported that the four of the five Memphis officers were arrested and received suspensions and reprimands while employed with the Memphis Police Department prior to the murder of Tyre Nichols. So at that time, I had recorded that before they initially stated that five officers had been fired. So I was tracking it from the very beginning, before the video was even out. But those suspensions and reprimands apparently were in regard to failures to report when those officers had used the physical force in the line of duty. So knowing that, Officer Emmett Martin was accused of pulling a firearm on two Memphis residents in a vehicle, pointing the firearm at one of their heads and threatening to blow off their face. And that was done in 2020. And then there's another officer, Demetrius Haley. He was accused of abuse in the corrections background. And it was hard to believe that no one within the Memphis Police Department leadership, they weren't aware, or they weren't at least suspecting that there may have been some kind of abuse of police power occurring. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna move to the next one. All right. Now I'm gonna put this up big screen here. Now, what you see here, and this is not fact, but this is, what it looks like. There are rumors, okay? There are rumors that are floating around the internet regarding the potential third party, which could have been an indirect factor in this incident of police brutality. And that rumor in totality turns out to be that allegedly Tyre Nichols worked at FedEx along with Officer Demetrius Haley's ex and the mother of his child. Now, the details surrounding the woman, if the woman allegedly was Haley's ex-wife or just was she his ex-girlfriend, that had not been verified. But, or at least to my knowledge, it had not been verified as of 3 days ago. Um, but it was rumored that Tyre Nichols and the officer and Officer Haley's ex had a relationship that Officer Haley didn't approve of. And there's importance to that being verified because it gives the prosecution a potential motive other than the one that was used to legally justify pulling Tyre Nichols' vehicle over, uh, so-called for reckless driving. But that's where the absence of Tyre Nichols being in the 2017 blue Nissan Sentra driving recklessly uh, uh, on the law enforcement officer's dash cam, on the vehicle's dash cam, that's where it would come into play. Now, that simple dash cam video could act as evidence to justify the initial stop, but apparently that does not officially exist. So, getting back to it, these rumors also present another potential motive in the initial stop. Haley, if directly involved with the influencing of the initial traffic stop, could have been profiling Tyre Nichols because of the nature of the relationship that he had with Haley's ex. Now, that would be a clear conflict of interest. But even though these are rumors, it does seem to fit better or make more sense than just six members of the Scorpion unit, finding a man who was recklessly driving, and instead of just giving him a ticket or citing, what his traffic infraction was, they pulled him out of the vehicle and began brutalizing him. This is precisely why people are saying that the incident is senseless, because to a lot of people it just didn't make any sense. Now, these rumors were substantiated with images of Officer Haley taking out a cell phone and taking a photo of Tyre sitting up leaning on the police cruiser, which is what image you see here, and that was after he had been bludgeoned. Now, it was rumored that Officer Haley took the photo and sent it to his ex. It's not the kind of CSI that I'm sure is officially approved, but it raises questions with me because I would like to know the veracity of that allegation. I would like to know if Officer Haley had a work cell phone and a personal cell phone on him, or was it either or how did that work? And like I said, that would be very important to verify that this actually happened officially. But they also said more was to come, so I'm sure that that will happen. But now we're going to get into a subject. This one is for you, Elgin, because this happened. You asked this question, okay? I know a lot of people ask this question, but this is very lengthy. I'm sorry, but a lot of this needs to be spoken about. So I made a simple Facebook post with a photo, and that was the same night that I viewed the entirety, not the entirety of the video, but most of the video footage that was released. And I made a simple Facebook post with a photo stating that Tyre Nichols was brutally murdered approximately 397 feet from his mother's home. Now, that night, he was trying to escape death by running home to his mother. Now, initially posted that Tyre Nichols was brutally murdered approximately 250 feet to 459 feet based on that police report that I had read, the image of the police report that I read. And what can be seen here, on the body camera of one of the officers who stated that their location was at the intersection of Ross Road and Castlegate Lane. And upon inspecting that photo, that I posted, I was able to understand that even that wasn't correct, or at least that acknowledged that there was some inconsistency, right? And after reviewing that photo, and then looking back again at the video footage, I began to understand exactly where the beating actually took place, and that was the intersection of Bear Creek Lane and Castlegate Lane. And I corrected my caption on my Facebook post to say exactly 397 feet. So Tyre was located 397 feet from his home. And I was able to understand that because if the police report was correct, that basically Tyre had ran 2,112 feet from where the traffic stop had officially reported. He was running. So I had to review the video to see where Mr. Nichols attempted to reach for the police officer's weapon, and I was unable to see where that had actually occurred because of most of the body cam footage that was covered, or the view of the body cam warned cameras. They were being obstructed to the point that you could only get a glimpse of what was actually happening from that body camera. The body camera of the white officer who is known as Officer or Detective Preston Hemphill. He was the officer that tased and pepper sprayed Tyre Nichols, but not according to the report. Another inconsistency maybe. But after looking at that, and how that act, it did not, it was inconsistent with the official police narrative. So Tyre Nichols reaching for one of the officers' firearm, I did not feel that narrative was even justified. One of the reasons I didn't feel that was justified is because they demanded that Tyre get out of the vehicle. When the driver is asked to step out of the vehicle, it changes the situation. And that kind of places the officer, in my opinion, in another theoretical kind of situation where the driver, if the driver decides to become combative, it then puts the officer's safety at a higher risk. But I'm not a law enforcement officer. There may be some people that, feel like there's a higher risk when the driver's sitting in the car. You're more than welcome to explain that. But anyway, and when I say sitting in the car, I mean the driver sitting in the car with his or sitting in the vehicle with his hands visibly on the steering wheel or where the officer can see him. So that's why I'm saying that. So when the driver is removed by force, I understand that it definitely is an escalation of that situation. So in the event that, all of this is unavoidable and the driver is removed from the vehicle, the officer needs some form of protection from the driver or potential combatant attempting to take away his state certified duty firearm. And because I know that, there are certain advancements in technology that offer more protection to law enforcement officers today, than they have of officers in the past, I believe that, he was reaching for my gun narrative was not the actual truth. So if firing a firearm holster with the appropriate retention system, you couldn't just walk up from behind me and easily pull my firearm out of the holsters. Um, I said that because for several reasons. One of those reasons is that I share the perspective that another person holding the advantage of the position from behind me would not easily be able to draw that firearm from the holster, is because that holster would have what is called the appropriate retention system in operation. Now, this is where we get to the meat and potatoes of tonight's stream. A firearm retention system is a system that's fitted in a firearm holster or device that helps to ensure that the firearm placed into the device or the holster remains in the holster. And in some cases, the retention system focuses on keeping the device or the holster attached to its carrier. Now, some of these systems within holsters do employ features such as trigger guards, mechanical release buttons, levers, levers, or even brakes. And often there's something called an altered draw stroke retention feature. And I've seen those, and I don't like them, but I know that is, a part of the retention system. So for the retention systems that work to attempt to keep, the device or the holster attached to a carrier, there are loops, which are frequently featured, even and also featured on military accessories. So I'm going to briefly say something about the loops. The loops are like what you saw in those old Western movies where before they would actually get ready to draw, you would see them remove the loop or unbutton the loop from the leather holster. You know, sometimes there were buttons and whatnot. I know more modern ones had buttons, um, but they would unsnap it, and then therefore they would be able to draw the firearm. So when I speak from this, I mean, I'm going to address this from the military side first, because I know I can state this as fact. Okay, so we do see loops sometimes on the military accessories, and those loops are called MOLLE. So hold on one second. Let me go ahead and get this straightened out for you. Nothing special, but I just want to be able to show this so that we are. All right. Now, this is what you would see is called MOLLE or a MOLLE system. All right. Let me get that on the screen for you so you can see it. So as I say it, you see it. This is what is called MOLLE. MOLLE is an acronym for modular lightweight load bearing or load carrying equipment. Okay. The loops sometimes feature straps like, you know, the featured MOLLE gear. Okay. That's something you'll hear in the military. The MOLLE is attached to a compatible system that is called PALS. And PALS is another acronym, which means pouch ladder system. Okay, this is something that when you go into basic training or whatever, you eventually, I think it's more or less everybody knows, but and you're not really quizzed, but it's something that you come across. I think when you go through basic training in the Army, I know that it's like it's nerve wracking. So you're worried about, you know, what questions are going to be asked for you, what you're going to be grilled. So you do find out about this ahead of time. You do find out about this early. So you'll find out, and you know you'll definitely learn about MOLLE gear. You'll definitely learn about the pouch attachment ladder system. I don't think we even referred to PALS at all during my time in service. You hear MOLLE all the time, but you never hear about PALS. And I think it's pretty much one of those things that's just like, you know, it's something that's already implied. So that system can be very time consuming to mount, to carry when you use MOLLE. Very, very time consuming. Unless you are experienced and know exactly, and you have a pattern, and you've been, you know, you like to wear your holster here, et cetera, et cetera. So another retention device feature is a quick attach mounting system. And I don't have a photo for that. I meant to get a photo for that, but I didn't get a chance to get a photo for that. So I apologize for that. But that's one example of that quick mounting, quick attach mounting system. Is like they're the magnetic holsters. Let me go ahead and get. They're the magnetic holsters that let me look this up real quick to make sure. Okay, stated that was muted. Just wanted to, you know, stay. I hope that the sound is okay. If the sound's all right, somebody please let me know. But getting back to this quick attach mounting system. So the quick attach mounting system is like one of the examples is the mounted magnetic holster that is underneath the steering wheel in the car, and it allows you to place your firearm and mount it, and it'll sit, you know, as like this underneath by the steering wheel, so you have very fast access to your firearm. Now, I'm gonna say something, and it's up for debate. Let me get this MOLLE off the screen. Sorry. Now, I'm going to say something. Um, as an African American, as a Black African American man, I would strongly avoid using that, especially with our current culture surrounding, you know, African Americans and the ability to freely exercise your Second Amendment rights. Um, you are not, you don't. I want to say this: you do have the ability, but technically, to be truthful, you don't have the ability to freely exercise your Second Amendment rights. It's not respected. I'll say that it's not respected as it is with a white European American, as your white European American counterpart. And I know that is a very controversial statement. You saw how hard it was for me to just simply state it. It's one sentence, and it was just hard for me to state it on live right now. However, we are seeing African American men gunned down in the street just, at the mere suspicion of having a firearm in their possession. And this is why I'm saying this. There are men getting gunned down, African American men that are getting gunned down at the mere suspicion. Not that they have a firearm, but the mere suspicion of them having a firearm in their possession. Most of the time that there is an incident where an unarmed individual is accused of having a firearm, the law enforcement officer involved in the shooting has never identified if the individual is in possession of a legal firearms permit. Okay. What we see from traumatic video footage all the time is whether it's taken by a police officer, body worn camera, or a well positioned, dash camera, or if it's a civilian who's recording it with, with their camera phone and live streaming, the entire police interaction. We see that the officer tends to react out of a fear or anxiety, as he or she screams out, he's got a gun, she's got a gun. Sometimes you'll even see, the response is simply gun. And then, that's the only green light that's needed at that point for the officers to conduct what would be subsequently defined as a justified shooting. Um, and as an African American man who has the desire and is proud to exercise his Second Amendment rights, the aforementioned is absolutely horrible to see practice in our country. It's part of the reason why I get a little upset sometimes, especially after having served in the United States Army overseas, even in a foreign country where it appears that there's more right to possess a firearm if you're a person of color there than it is here in America. And this is supposed to be America, the land of the free. Now, like I said, I know that the earlier comment was controversial, and so was that last statement I just made. But it's indicative to a very deeper seated issue here in our society, and it is the premise of a conversation that we're not having because many of us are not ready to explore the ideas that that have been utilized to conclude that particular outlook. Um, being a black man in America and not being able to have a firearm, like fast mounted system like that, and have your firearm there and accessible there in your vehicle. Um, I realized that we didn't have the privilege to utilize that right that way when I saw um, on my birthday of all times too, Philando Castile, and that was crazy. So I think it was Lando Castillo, and then it was Alton Sterling days later. And Alton Sterling didn't even have a weapon. He just was accused of having a weapon. Philando Castillo had a concealed weapons permit and could not even reveal that and show his gun owner's permit to the officer because he had already began unloading 7 bullets into his chest. And it does bother me because before I've been stopped by law enforcement. Here in Brevard County. And oftentimes, they would ask me about, my weapon, firearms, concealed weapons permit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would volunteer that information, let them know I did have a firearm in the vehicle at that time. And pretty much, like I said, as having the desire to want to be proud about, practicing your, exercising your Second Amendment right. I then realized later on, after the shooting of Philando Castillo, that may not have been wise by me doing that. So getting back to the quick attach mounting systems, there's the quick detach belt loop. And let me see if I can go ahead and get that on the screen for you. You see that with the Molly here. All right. Now, there's a quick detach belt loop, and that's seen there over there on the right. And this can sometimes be used in conjunction with other retention systems that are identified as such as a paddle. Okay. Now, give me 1 second. Let me get back to here because I want to show you a paddle. When I say paddle, I want you to this is a very early paddle. I think this paddle was I acquired this 2005, maybe, I think, somewhere around that time. But this is a paddle for a firearm, and this is when they first started doing the mold plastic mold cast. I know a lot of times I think at that time, I kind of date myself. They were using the leather ones, and then they started coming out with these plastic mold ones, and I think they got really popular. But you see the paddle as a place for the belt. You can slide it in there on your hip, and then you can see you have your holster here, and then the trigger guard, acts as a way of retention possibly. But this is what a paddle system is. It's a small one. This is one of the first ones. It's a very cheap one. This is one I bought just so I could. I was trying to make money. I wasn't trying to look good or anything like that. But that was one of the earlier paddle systems. All right. So the paddle holsters are some of the most popular types of retention systems that and that was according to a statement that was pulled from gunbelts.com, right? But I think that it's just easier to wear those paddles, you know, than others. Now the paddle system uses a paddle shaped flap, which you saw that red paddle shaped flap, and it can be quickly inserted inside the firearm owner's pants. Now the paddles are contoured in a way that they comfortably sit. Um, they comfortably sit on the hip of the wearer. You can see it. Take it over here so you can see it there. Okay. Now the patterns have a ridge that where the wearer can use that to secure the paddle with the edge of the wearer's belt. And that's what I showed you earlier here, right? Now you often see plainclothes officers, and detectives at the time when these were popular. Uh, you would often see them wearing those, and when they be addressed with casual attire, and they would be using that, what is called a paddle retention system. All right. Now, next you can see where these systems were called clip-ons, right? So let me go and get that back on the screen for you. You can see where they were basically called clip-ons, right? Now, this one you can see the clip where it's adjusted so that the firearm can sit at an angle, if it's desired, right? You can see that capability there, and it's done with using a screwdriver or a Gerber tool. I say Gerber tool for those in the military because that was how you could quickly adjust some of that stuff. But the clip-on is mainly used by many in the concealment process, and it allows the wearer or the user to wear the firearm in places like the small of their back. It allows them to put it in the waist area or the ankle, even depending on how large the firearm may be. And another retention system that I forgot to mention too is the cord. Okay. Now I've seen this kind of retention system used more in the military versus in the professional law enforcement setting. And the cord looks like a small little bungee cord, and it's literally in some cases it's just a paracord that's attached to the base of the firearm. And I'm not endorsing the use of cords more than I am just informing you about a different form of retention that exists. So I'm just trying to cover that so that because sometimes you miss stuff and you're like, I should have told him that. But all these retention systems that we just briefly covered, let's say trigger guards, mechanical release buttons, levers, thumb brakes, altered draw stroke retention, molly loops, magnetic mallet holsters. I think I covered that, and the quick detach belt loops, the clip-ons, the paddle holsters, and there's others, but they all rest on concepts. Okay, there's two concepts that I'm thinking of now. The first one is called active retention, and the other, well, before I go to the other, the first one's called active retention, and active retention
uses mechanisms on a holster, and they lock the gun in place within the holster, and that active retention system must be activated by the shooter in order for the firearm to be successfully drawn from that holster. That sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's just, I know you might have to rewind it and watch it again, but remember that the mechanical release buttons and the levers and the thumb brakes, and I'm going to show you what a thumb brake is in a moment when I show you another holster. Um, those features classify the weapon as an active retention system. Okay. And the second one, getting to the next one of the other concept, was a passive retention. Passive retention, it uses the carrier's design as retention, holding the firearm in place, like the paddle I showed you earlier. Now, this passive retention is usually like a manual unlocking of a retention device. It's not required. Okay, so it's not required to have one that's a manual unlocking. All right, so it's primarily it's going to be, all you have to do is draw the firearm from its holster itself, and that's where it's free, it's going to be passive. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about. So let me read the definition of a passive retention holster. It extends greater accessibility to the firearm because the retention system has less security features than that, and that increases the ease of quick drawing your firearm before you use it. Now, the holsters with active retention, going back to the active retention holsters, right? They must be trained, well, the officer must be trained to the point that they're proficient in disengaging all of that device's active retention features. And that can be difficult at times. We'll talk about that. There's a quick drawing firearm under stressful conditions that they have to simulate sometimes in real-time tactical situations. And that action sometimes is referred to as a draw stroke. A lot of information. Sorry, got to get it out to you. For example, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to jump around real quick, but just bear with me here. So an example is I hope I'm putting it in front of me so you can see because I have a lighter shirt. This is a Black Hawk Serpa level 3 tactical holster. Okay, just something I wanted for my particular occupation. Okay, so this is the best. This is just good for me. Okay, this holster utilizes an anti-lock system, and it consists of basically of 3 actions that you have to complete to successfully remove the firearm out of the holster. Okay, I don't want to show a firearm or anything like that on live. I just saw, I forgot his name, the individual who is the CEO for Wolf Arms. Apparently, he's been kicked off of Facebook because he is a firearms manufacturer and he showed firearms, and I guess they've been flagging him. So I'm trying not to get flagged. I even had videos to kind of give myself breaks in between years so I can show you guys some stuff, but I'm worried about that. I've already got 2 strikes for simple stuff. Anyway, getting back to this. Now, this is is an auto lock retention system. It uses an auto lock retention system, and you have to have 3 actions to successfully remove the firearm out of the holster, and that's if to do it successfully. Now, to successfully retrieve your firearm from that holster, the following actions must be executed. One, the wearer, if it's just on your hip or wherever it is, it must deactivate the retention system by pressing the lever button that's located on the side of the holster with the index or the trigger pulling finger. And that's the button you see here. Okay. Now, there was another paddle that I had purchased. Never got a chance to really use it. So I did purchase it, but then I ended up going to the military. I went into the Army, and I got this paddle system, and this is specifically for the firearm that I was using. And I worked at the Port of Canaveral. So, at that time, I wanted to use this paddle system, and this paddle system basically had this lever, which I thought was like just the coolest thing to keep it, your firearm retained, and since you're working around people, whatnot, and it was just one of those things that it was like, hey, do that. You want to keep it. And I'm not gonna say this is, this is more like like everybody's got iPhones, iPhone versus Android. So it's kind of like one of those things like, everybody was getting it. So I just, I went ahead and did it too. So this is one of the, another version. This was like the next step up from the first paddle system that I showed you. Okay. Um, thought that was so cool, but you're just grabbing all that stuff and whatnot. But there's a button release you saw there. Like I said, there's a lever. All right. Active retention system. Right? You press that button and it allows you to be able to pull the firearm out. So you're kind of keeping it there because you can see it's got a trigger guard here. So you kind of keep it there, and as you press the button, you deactivate the retention system, and then you can pull your firearm out. Having your grip, you pull the firearm out, and then you keep your finger along the trigger wheel, not put it on the trigger until you're ready to fire. Let me see. That retention mechanism acts automatically to immediately retain the firearm each time the firearm is holstered. So when you put it in there, usually you're going to hear like a clicking sound or whatever, and it'll lock in. Okay. Now, a direct indicator to help the wearer confirm, when I'm reading this, is the active that the device or the mechanism is in the activation is there's a clicking sound when the firearm is successfully holstered. I just said that, just want to read it to make sure I covered it. And the second step is deactivating the loop/hood or the cover. And that is for this particular, I know I got a Serpa, and I know Serpa's not, it's not popular with a lot of people, but there's a deactivation of the loop. Give me 1 second. Got to charge my phone. All right, sorry about that. Saw the screen go dark and I knew that it was getting ready to shut down. So second is deactivating the loop or the hood or the cover. Now there's another lever button that also acts as a locking mechanism here. And this particular locking mechanism is often referred to as the loop. And that's what I was telling you, like a loop usually over the back of the firearm. And in this particular case, it's referred to as the cover or the hood, and that's this part, right? So it's called a cover or hood because it acts as a retention mechanism. It locks in place to cover the rear sights or the rear sight, the firearm's rear sight aperture. Now the cover works in sync with another lever. And that lever is located here to lock the cover of the hood in place. Now this feature of the holster isn't acting as an auto lock retention mechanism, as it may be redundant, but sometimes it interferes with the law enforcement officer's firearm proficiency or the shooter's firearms proficiency and efficiency. So you can see here when I press on that thumb brake, it then allows the cover to move back. All right, and this will retain the firearm in place. So like when you want to disengage it, you press on that, the inside of your thumb, and then it pops forward, and then you're able to pull it, but you still have to actually to use the mechanism here with your trigger finger. Okay, so just showing you little retention features. Okay, now I want to make a small important note before I want to state this. I didn't want to even show this holster actually, but before I continue, now that's the fact is that notice that Serpa holsters are not they're not well received in a lot of the professional law enforcement occupations, and a lot of that is due to the first retention mechanism that we just covered, the auto lock retention mechanism that's found it's found to increase the risk of negligent discharges. And that's when, some people have tested, some shooters have tested the serpent holster using that quick stroke technique. Now, personally for me, and I'll say the reason why is because I think, they gets dirty or whatever, but, if you got a military background, you're always going to keep your stuff clean. As you can see, I try to keep it as clean as possible. But you always keep it clean. But, for me, that type of holster was adequate for a security professional occupation, in my opinion. And I say that because there is no situation where a security professional is at a tactical disadvantage. And I say that, because it works well for me because I will ensure before I draw my firearm that I've identified the target and that I've exhausted all other means of de-escalating the situation or de-escalation that's available to me. Okay. As a security professional, it's imperative to understand that security professionals and officers, security officers, that is, because they're different from police officers, but it's imperative to understand that security professionals and security officers are not privileged with state-sanctioned police powers. Okay, make sure you hear what I'm saying. A lot of people say you use big words, or you talk fast, whatever. Hear what I'm saying. Don't mess it up. Okay, I'm telling you, there is a difference, and it's imperative to understand the difference between a security professional, a security officer, and police officers or peace officers. Okay, security officers are not sanctioned with state, police powers. Okay, there's a distinct and drastic difference between the two. All right, we might go over that later. I doubt it. We're already in an hour. I'm trying to keep this short, or short as possible. Will make my point. Okay. If there are any questions at any time, you can go ahead and type it. I'm trying to keep an eye on it. I know that sometimes it does not tell me when I get a comment in certain groups. I'm not reading the comments, and that's good. So the third step, or actually I need to get back to, so getting back to what's relevant, the specific lever or locking mechanism that's activated manually, like the thumb brake that I showed you, after the firearm is inserted in the holster, and after the auto locking mechanism that's located on the side of the holster, the one that you use with your trigger finger, and then there's a trigger guard also itself. So know that those are, like you see all the retention systems and safety mechanisms working in unison. The wearer has to use the inside of the thumb to press the lever button so that the covering hood can be applied. And they all, like I said, they all successfully work together. It's just another part of the holster's overall firearm retention system. Okay, so it's all working together as part of one system. Now, the third thing you got to do, seems like nothing. Some people say this is nothing, but when you go to these classes or you go to a certain firearms class, and I want to plug another one, but I don't have the information right now. But there's an individual. His name is Jay. He's in charge of a firearms class over in Orlando. I'm hoping to go attend it. When I get the information all out for you guys, I'll give you the information. I also found out about another gun club here in Brevard called the Dynasty Gun Owners. I think it's Dynasty Gun Club. So like I said, I'll get that information to you guys as soon as I get everything kind of put out. But the third action that we were discussing isn't necessarily an action of retention, but it's something that is intrinsic to the handling of your firearm. So when you are in a state that that requires readiness, is something that like I said, is something that you're going to practice on, even mostly in private. But when handling your firearm, it is assumed that you have practiced several aspects of operating that firearm safely. And this is where you use the trigger guard on your holster, having the ability to effectively employ the use of a trigger guard. It then becomes paramount. So keeping your finger off that trigger and above the trigger well is a great technique to avoid issues such as negligent discharge. And this is one of the reasons why they were talking about the serpent holster is not very popular. I've heard stories about it, but different strokes for different folks, right? Utilizing an effective draw stroke requires the weapons handler to have a comfortable but strong grip on the hilt of your firearm. And using that effective draw stroke, the firearm must be retrieved from the holster by pulling upward on the hilt of the firearm after successfully disengaging the other two retention mechanisms. Now, I want to state that there are times that some people disengage the hood cover. Uh, they disengage the hood cover or what was considered the loop retention mechanism. And they do that prior to engaging in a quick draw stroke activity like target practice or but they disengage that. There's sometimes I guess they disengage that before they engage with a person or a situation that could prove to be dangerous. And that's not extremely odd because this basically simply just reduces the level of retention so that the officer can assess the firearm faster if it's not impeded by the features of the holster's retention system. Now, in some cases, an effective draw stroke is important because some of the holsters act to retain the firearm if it is not drawn directly upward. And that's where I get to say some of them, I've seen some and I've dealt with some that, have been, this is earlier versions. So I don't know if they probably have something out now that's real easy. And since getting kids, I have not been keeping up with all the tack gear that's available out there. Some stuff I look at and just pass over. Some stuff I'm like, I gotta get it. But if the firearm's not drawn directly up, sometimes it retains. And I know this is kind of one of those older ones. They used to have that feature. Sometimes people use the tactical holsters that are located in the thigh area to help avoid that, to help avoid that ineffective draw stroke from the hip. Because sometimes when it's from the hip, they're doing this, and it just unless you practice on it, it just feels, odd, right? So, when they have a hip or when the holster is attached to the duty belt area, etc. The draw stroke is something that that should be professionally and thoroughly researched and reviewed and practiced. Okay, it is something that is acquired by firearms as experts and those who've achieved fire mastery in the handling of firearms. So, a lot of information there. I stated that information simply so that I could get here. Okay. So because of the potential use of firearm retention systems with law enforcement officers, with their occupational equipment, the narrative of he reached for my firearm is highly likely a whole excuse that needs to be eradicated. It needs to go. Because even if a suspect reaches for a holster firearm, if the officers are using holsters that employ firearm retention systems like the one that we just spent 30 minutes discussing, sorry it took that long, but if a suspect reaches for that officer's firearm, that holster or that firearm retention system will reduce the suspect's ability to be able to take that firearm away and then even use the firearm to harm the officer. So it's proven fact that firearm retention systems increase the officer's safety. So mitigating that issue could depend on whether the department orders or mandates their officers to have that type of equipment that increases firearm retention. I don't know if that is, and that is where we go here. Okay, my next point. Sorry, it won't come up. Town hall questions. Okay. In some ways, this event involving Tyre Nichols personally reminded me of the beating of Rodney King. And despite the differences, I felt that this murder would result in points of actions like town halls again. Okay. And my concern was that the questions we were asking our local leaders last time in 2020, they were not elaborate enough to communicate, the things that, things like that this kind of stuff is not acceptable in our community. We needed to ask very detailed, involved questions like I've laid out here tonight. Question number one. We've heard this narrative of he was reaching for my gun. What kind of occupational equipment is utilized by our Palm Bay Police Department? Next question. Are there retention systems being employed by the Palm Bay Police Department? Next question is that the type of equipment mandated or regulated for officers working for the Palm Bay Police Department to wear? If not, next question, if not, if they're not regulated to wear it, can it be made as a suggestion? And the next question after that would be, what do we need to do as a community to influence that step? And the next question would be, is there a standard holster firearm retention that Brevard County deputies are wearing? And then this, and I'm not, well, let me go ahead and say it. Another question I would ask: how in depth is your diversity training? That was something that I really wanted to ask back in 2020, but I never got that chance. And I didn't feel like it was, the time was right. I didn't want to bring it down. Everybody was here at a certain level, and then stating something or using something as an example would bring the energy down in the room. So I didn't want to do that. But now that that last question basically, as in the depth of the diversity training, I want to ask that, like I said, in 2020, and that question was asked, but it was asked in the form of, asking if officers in a Brevard County were given diversity training. And, but you see, I'm asking how in depth is the diversity training compared to, are they given diversity training? Because I know that already, they get diversity training. I already knew that. But, I had good reason to believe that that training is simply and very diluted. It's what I would call a very diluted coverall, the kind of training the Martin Luther King Jr. was a good man training. Uh, that diversity training didn't move into the depths of the cultural diversity. And in my opinion, I didn't feel like it, that it matters. I felt like it matters. And the reason why is because, when you're policing a community that, or when you are within that community, like the Black community, and you're policing that community, you should understand, um, your training should, it might superficially cover saying the N word is extremely egregious to a Black person. However, if, that's especially true if you're white. But is it as in depth as mandating a documentary such as viewing a list that includes a viewing list that includes Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America by Jeffrey Robinson? It's a very good documentary, and it's an opener. It's clear there's somebody who's non-threatening, because I know that is an issue for some people. But there's a documentary called Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America by Jeffrey Robinson. And I think that at the end of the year or the beginning of this fiscal year, that should have been added to a list, which is a part of diversity training, so that they can understand this is something that, is, within our community. There are people who are aware that are in our community that understand this. You have to ask the questions. Does that training, that diversity training, does it inform that there are members within our community that you're policing, that understand that policing has its origins with slave patrols? I know that this kind of started to come up in a few, but like I said, everybody's always worried about keeping the energy here, and I'm not a believer in that. You gotta get to the heart of it, right? And because each police department has a different policies, we got to ask these questions for each entity that's charged with policing in our communities. So know that when I asked those earlier questions, I kept saying Palm Bay. I'm not picking on Palm Bay Police Department, and I'm not picking on the Brevard County Sheriff's Department, okay, our sheriff's office. I'm simply saying that we need to ask the questions about crisis intervention team method as an alternative to traditional policing, um, um, uh, traditional policing methods. Are they currently being used in our community, and can they be used in our community? Can they be employed? We need to ask that about whether it's Melbourne, Palm Bay, Titusville, Cocoa. We need to ask that about, and I'm just saying the town hall questions. That's why it's down there, town hall questions. Okay, so I know that there are methods that are being employed as far as the application of our technology in law enforcement today. I was told that there's an apparatus that would help, in the mental health crisis intervention, and it was called the WRAP. And I was told that it could be utilized in a way to literally wrap a person in a blanket, in a kind of blanket-like apparatus. But I don't know if they deployed it yet. I don't know if it even, I don't know much about even its existence yet. But I welcome this as an opportunity for anyone who would like to share anything about that or know anything about that. You can do that right here in the comment section. You can go ahead and send me a message. I know most people do. They don't get in the comment section. They always send me messages like they're embarrassed to ask the questions here on the show. I don't do this to try to embarrass you. I put the questions up there so everybody else can see it instead of doing like traditional live streams where they look and they go, so and so asked, and then they read it. You know, you can go ahead and see it there, and I can continue to roll and flow. It's a lot faster that way, in my opinion. So I know that there's also a device where they fitted it to law enforcement vehicles that act as a sort of grappling device. It allows law enforcement, it allows the law enforcement vehicle to deploy a net-like mechanism underneath a speeding vehicle, and they hook it in and allow the vehicle to be restrained via like these car tow strap like tethers. I saw it was like yellow car strap like tow straps, and it was all weaved together in a net. Um, and I was telling some friends about this because I saw a video on TikTok or whatever where they use this grappling device, and it was attached to the bottom of a truck. They stuck a like kind of like a tow strap there, like net like thing underneath the car, and when they deployed the device, it actually literally just like grabbed onto the car, and then they were able to slam on the brakes of the truck and then pull the car to a stop. And it basically pulled the car to a stop right there where the car was speeding, right there in the middle of the road. Now, it was a tow strap like tether grappling the car. I didn't know what it was, you know, I didn't know what it was called, but it was some Batman Batmobile application stuff. Um, and that does, you know, that what that does tell me though is that tells me that they are getting involved in deploying alternative methods of policing, and it tells me that they do hear us, which I never thought for a moment that they don't know what what they're doing or anything. I always sided with the idea that this stuff was intentional. Like some of these incidents were intentional because of the way, like when the officers got behind the car and started to get their story straight, or when they're like, screaming, stop resisting. It's kind of like they're painting that narrative. They're doing it so even if you took a lie detector test or whatnot, you would in your mind you second guess it, like, was I resisting? And then, they wouldn't read, it wouldn't accurately measure your response. But anyway, once you've seen, like if you're like me, once you've seen the capabilities of DARPA, that DARPA develops for the military, like from that aspect, you understand that very well that domestic law enforcement applications are not as difficult as they would have you to believe. And DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research and Projects Agency. Known about this for a long time, and they would be developing things that would employ applications, military applications, and then the also law enforcement. And that is possible because we do see, the sheriff's department has a Hummer, so to say that it's military does not, that is a military application, does not apply to law enforcement would be disingenuous. All right. Now let's go ahead and start getting ready to conclude this. Just checking for comments. Don't see any comments. All right. Detective Preston Hemphill, the officer that pulled Tyre Nichols out of the vehicle. Apparently, he was relieved of duty on January the 8th, and that was one day after the entire incident. And it was at that time that we were notified that there was a pending investigation that involved Hemphill and another unnamed officer. But Detective Hemphill first joined the Memphis Police Department back in 2018. Now, the sixth officer, Hemphill, was reported to have been fired last Friday. And from what the headlines had stated, he was fired for multiple department policy violations. Now, it was also says that those violations occurred in the Tyre Nichols case. So specifically from what happened in the Tyre Nichols case was the reason for his termination. All right. Now, after a review of the circumstances surrounding the incident, We determined that Officer Preston violated multiple department policies. Officer Hemphill was departmentally charged and terminated. Departmentally charged, I wonder what that means. And terminated from the Memphis Police Department for the following violations. One was personal conduct. Two was truthfulness. Three was compliance with regulations to WIT, which I assume is short for witness. Conducted energy weapon taser, compliance with regulations, uniforms, issued equipment, and I assume that's the camera, inventory and processing recovered property. Okay. The statement went on to say that the administrative investigation is continuing and multiple Memphis Police Department officers are under investigation for departmental policy violations. Action on those officers will be made available in the coming days. The Shelby County District Attorney's Office released the following statement. We are in the stage of an investigation where we're looking into all matters, including the actions of Officer Preston Hemphill and others who were on the scene. This whole case is very difficult to even review. With more details sure to come, it does not look like it's going to be great. This is already having a negative impact on the overall picture because of the mainstream media. And they just simply pulled out the old playbook before it could even get any dust on it. And I could explain that further, but I know that I'm going to get close to closing this out here. What I did have planned was to kind of show you where the mainstream narrative has been misdirected. And if anyone who's been watching, Jason Whitlock's most recent comments where he blames it on single mother culture, we'll have that conversation. I may stream tomorrow night. We may have that conversation at that night. But I'm going to jump past that. Just let you know that is where the misdirection had occurred. So there's a lot of breakdown I did go into. I don't want to go into to that tonight. I know we are about an hour and a half, and I'm going to get ready to close this out. Let me get to where we can. Get to where this hits home. So I'll make a very bold assessment when I cover Jason Whitlock's video and some of the information that he was trying to put out. But we do need to have conversations like the one that we will, have. And in that conversation, you'll see Jason Whitlock double down on, a new Jim Crow idea, and had a bunch of narratives. He had several things to say. There's like 2-3 videos I think I have to show you, but I won't show you now. And that's going to deal with what is called a Black family crisis. So we'll talk about that later. But let me get to this. Okay. Recently, our sheriff made a video that exposed the details behind an incident where an autistic man in the Black community was tased and arrested. And it was alleged that, he was choking. Get this off the screen, actually. Because I don't want to show his face anymore. All right, let me see what this looks like. Okay, I want to get that off the screen. That was just tired of seeing his face. But okay, so getting back to recently, our sheriff, Wayne Ivey, posted a video that exposed the details behind an incident where an autistic man in the Black community was tased. And I believe that was a Black community in Cocoa, was tased and arrested. It was alleged that he was holding a large knife and peering into windows of the neighbors or someone located on his street. The sheriff showed a video that revealed that the individual needed indeed had something that looked like a knife in his hand, and that the deputies were involved, that they moved to deal with the situation by de-escalating the potential life and death situation to a situation that required less than lethal force. He also revealed in that video that there was a 911 call, and it pretty much justified what looked to be the appropriate use of force. And it was, to me, it looked like it was a good job. So, but it definitely could have been worse. And when you take a look at a video from another perspective, you can see how this incident definitely could have turned out very, very bad.
Hey, stop! Jay, move. Excuse me. Excuse me. That's a kid. Get the fuck back. This is my house. This is my house. This is my house. He autistic. Hey. Hey, bro. Hold on. Ask for a sergeant. Bro, this is a fucking kid. He's my neighbor. That's a kid. That's a kid. That's the kid, he's autistic, dude. Hey, my mama come out for treatment, bro. You getting sued. Jay, step back. Jay, step back. That's a fucking kid, bro. That's a fucking kid, bro. You in my mother's property. Back up. You in my yard. Back up. You getting sued. Jay, step right there. You getting sued, bro. That's a fucking kid. You going to fuck down, bro. That's a kid, bro. Go get Tiffany. Shut up and you go get her. That's a kid, bro. Y'all right here riding through here like somebody doing something, telling me to get out my mother's yard. Bro, you tripping. That's a fucking kid, bro.
All right. Sorry for the delay. Trying to monitor and give a good time for a break between the delays. But that was the first part of the video. And I came across that video on TikTok, like many people who, will because of the hashtags. But you can clearly see that video made the situation look a lot different than what was shown to us by the Brevard County Sheriff. And I think that video can be located on the Brevard County Sheriff's Office Facebook page. Actually, it may have been actually on Wayne Ivy's page. I don't know if they have the same page, or I think it's different. They have different pages, so it may be on Wayne Ivy's page. But in case you want to go and search, you just go and take a look at that. It's recent, so you'll be able to find that video, and you'll know it when you see it. But it does not, but it does show that the officers appear to have handled that very well. But to touch on something again, so that we understand the need for transparency, as well as why there's a demand for it, I want you to take a look at the second part of this video.
You study talking, you just tased the autistic kid, bro, in my motherfucking yard. Yeah, you. What's your name? You tased the autistic kid, jerk. Jerk. You going to fuck down. You probably hurt that boy. He got heart problems. Stupid fucker. I told you 8 times. That's the fucking kid. 10 to 8 fucking times. Bro, you fucked up, bro. You going down, bro. I told you 10 times that's a kid, bro. That's a kid, officer. You ignored me, bro. I got no video. You fucked up. That's a fucking kid. You fucked up, bro.
He has a very serious...
That's a kid, bro. He got heart problems, bro.
And heart problems.
You lame as fuck, bro.
We got this here on video. I screamed across the street the whole
You lame as fuck, bro. Him holding him. You lame as fuck, bro. You a pussy, bro. I told you that's a kid, bro. Pussy ass cracker. You just changed that fucking boy. Say he autistic, bro. Shut the fuck up. What happened? I said this is my mother's house. He said fuck that. I said this is my mother's fucking kid. He changed him. He did what the fuck he wanted. It's on video, bro. Racist again. Oh my god.
You see towards the end of that of that video that the officers never really engaged with the community and what seemed like in what seemed like an objective way until the situation was over, maybe. Or it could have been that because that person recording the video shouted out a racial epithet, and that is what generated a response. I don't know if you want to watch that again. I don't see anybody in the room. So because you don't want to view it again and break that down, I'm not going to spend any more time on it, but you can review the video once I'm done streaming, and you'll be able to see that there was not a response until after that racial epithet was thrown. So you do hear one of the personnel for the Brevard County Sheriff's Department reply in a very condescending manner at the end, saying, "There we go, being racist again." And that shows you that there's an elephant in the room and that some of their members do not understand the depth of racism and the impact that it has in regard to policing within the community, okay? Within the Black community, I should say, because I won't speak for white people living in the white community, okay? Now, seeing a video like that gives us reason to why Alex Goings requested or even demanded, however you want to say it, transparency. But I do believe it is his right, as well as the public's right, to know Brevard County Sheriff's Department, you know, it does not seem to want their deputies to wear body cameras. So because of all these things working together in a situation like that video, how it looks from that perspective versus how it looked from the dash cam of the Sheriff's Department, you can see why the demand for transparency is there. So to conclude, I just want to state that the Black community doesn't owe an explanation specifically as to why the Tyre Nichols situation involved Black officers, but that doesn't matter when these methods, like forming the Scorpion unit, was done as a part of an initiative for police reform. Basically, it reveals a lot. So it was done so that they would put a Black face out there to make the same form of policing more comfortable or acceptable on the surface, okay? And that shows a very superficial effort that only masks representation. It only shows representation, but it's not true representation, okay? That's what I'm saying to you. Now, these officers involved were still acting as a proxy to the systemic racism. And this is an example of policing men, the Tyre Nichols situation, that specifically is an example of policing men, innocent men, and how it somehow can become harassing the community. So this is where, you know, the whole point of the conversation 2 years ago was lingering around, you know, and that was when we were talking to Willie Taylor Live, and we were talking about just joining the police force as a Black police officer. And then that way, you know, if you do that, then the injustice like police brutality will stop. This is something that we talked about with Willie Taylor years ago, myself and Quentin, my co-host, and I tried to explain that the system was working the way it was designed, and that I did not believe that it would be wise to just join the police force with the assumption that a Black officer will stop injustices like police brutality. So before we could get to that point, though, as a viable solution, we must address the police culture. As I was trying to say this a while ago. In fact, I already have a police brutality, thing already set up and ready to go. And one of the things is we're going to talk about an officer by the name of Brandon Hill, I believe. Brandon was dealing with what he called was a Jim Crow culture, and we we're going to talk about the department culture. I even had a discussion with a friend of mine, and we talked about this, and we talked about each department, each police department or entity has their own culture. And so this is something that, you know, which is why I didn't just jump all over that immediately, but that, you know, I'm mapping out the conversation so that we can actually produce tangible solutions to these and responses to these conversations. I know they're tough. I know a lot of people don't like to have them. But we keep running into it, and there's a lot of people who turn their heads. And it seems like you in the Black community, people in the Black community, if you're going to ignore this problem when it comes and it sits on your doorstep, you're going to want everybody else to pay attention. You're going to want people to discuss this. You're going to want people to have the discussion and whatnot. But when they turn and they give the same treatment that you gave it and just ignore it and say, I don't even want to talk about it because I don't want to see the video. When you do that, you're doing yourself an injustice. And this is what creates the atmosphere that we engaged 2 years ago when we first started streaming, live streaming, and coming across people who were saying, women, white women that were saying there's no such thing as a glass ceiling, or referencing a glass ceiling in a joking way, not understanding what that actually means as far as the social order and the patriarchal construct. I'm not gonna get into details about that, but this is why we have to have those conversations. So because the police culture in America is a very large problem, one officer alone has very little chance of making that change without making waves. Okay, and I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not saying that it can make change. Listen to what I'm saying. It is almost impossible. Very little chance for him to be able to make change without making waves. Okay, and that's simply just a roundabout way of saying that if there is going to be change from within, which I highly doubt, as a Black police officer, it cannot be done alone. Okay, and this is another issue that becomes complicated when you step back and you look at the bigger picture regarding police department culture, and then you come into contact with the local governance. And oftentimes there are multiple problems concerning how to deal with racial inequity at the local level. Now, I have an example I can show you, but I want to close out tonight because it has been long. I just wanted to make my points to put away the certain narratives that are used to justify police brutality. So I'm just going to go ahead and conclude tonight's live stream. Okay, I want to say thank you to all those who have tuned in and tried to watch as much as you could. I know that there are other events. I know LeBron is probably making history. I should be watching it. I got other things going on. I wanted to thank my co-host for some of the things that he's done behind the scenes currently and in the past to help with the production of this perspective. And I want to say that this conversation is not over. I may stream tomorrow night, but as a general sense, the conversation is not over. There's much to be had. It was just to highlight a very significant point that continues to come up with these issues. And it is taking me over 2 years to be able to talk about the he reached for my gun narrative. And I'm glad to at least have the opportunity to share my opinion regarding that. Now, I hope that this will encourage you all to have a deeper level conversation among yourselves. And as always, I bid you a good night, and may the Most High grant you peace. May He grant you love, and may He grant, or may the Most High continue to guide your path.